Welcome back. Today I have a really great chance to talk with Kevin, who's a very deep yogi friend of mine, and we're going to do a demonstration of timeline therapy. So it's just a demonstration. So he's never done timeline therapy before, and we're going to ask him to come up with a very small negative emotion, and we're going to use timeline therapy, and you're going to see how fast it works and how complete it works. So a lot of times when I'm doing timeline therapy, I can tell that the process is already pretty much completed, but the person is not used to having a negative emotion simply erase and disappear on them. And so they're trying to figure it out, and they say, well, maybe it's still there. And that's good. We want to check, and we want to make sure that it's totally gone. But when timeline therapy works extremely well, it works like that, just amazingly, because it works with how the unconscious mind holds negative material in the timeline, in the subconscious mind. And so it's a really powerful process. I'm really excited to show it to you today with Kevin, and I hope you enjoy it. And just understand, this is just a small demonstration. Timeline therapy also works with trauma. It works with all kinds of negative emotions and deep held problems. So let's get into it. Without thinking, if you could just go ahead and point to your past. Just go ahead, if it was in some kind of direction to you. In the back?
Yeah.
Perfect. And now go ahead and point to your future.
Not that way.
Perfect. So it's skewing at a line there. That's perfect. So that would be, is the line going through you?
Yeah, it kind of passes like through my
Through
shoulder.
your shoulder.
Yeah.
So you're still in time. We call that in time. But you turned it to make it more efficient for you, which is very good.
Okay.
It's always very interesting how people store time. So this is how your unconscious mind stores time. So now you know you have a timeline, and that's how your unconscious mind stores time.
Okay.
And it's turning it a little this way so you can kind of see what's coming down the road.
Yeah.
In your future.
Okay, that makes sense.
Right? And so we've never done timeline before, right?
No.
Have you ever done timeline before this?
I've heard you mention it, but I really don't know anything about it.
Right. Okay, great. So all we're going to do today is I just want you to think of a small negative emotion in your past. And I know you're a spiritual guy, that might be a stretch, but any little tiny negative emotion that's in your past.
Okay.
You have one?
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about it, can you feel it? Can you still feel the negative charge?
Yeah.
Can you tell me what the emotion is?
Fear, anxiety, hyper-awareness, and concern. Kind of all wrapped in a nutshell.
So fear. Would fear be the uppermost emotion? Anxiety?
I think fear was pretty high.
Okay.
Yeah.
So would it be all right with your unconscious mind to go ahead and let go of that fear and anxiety today and have a conscious experience of it?
Yes.
Beautiful. So I'm going to say a bunch of stuff. I just want you to answer me spontaneously, just completely spontaneously, without thinking logically. So when you think about that fear and anxiety and you feel it, right? What is the root cause of this problem? The very first instance when disconnected that will cause the problem to disappear. If you were to know, trusting your unconscious mind, was it before, during, or after your birth? Before, during, or after?
After.
And if you were to know, trusting your unconscious mind, how old were you? And what's the first number that just kind of bubbles up?
10.
10. Beautiful. Excellent. So go ahead and float right up above your timeline, because you already know where your timeline is, and just float all the way back to when you were 10, to that very first instance. And when you're back there, can you feel that fear and anxiety below you?
Yeah.
Good. So go ahead and float right down into that very first instance, seeing the things you saw, hearing the things you heard, and feeling the things you felt. Can you feel that?
Yes.
All right. So go ahead and float up right up above that. Just pop right out and float right up above that instance, and float way before it. I want you to float way before all of the chain of events that led to that event. So just go ahead and float all the way backwards, just all the way back before that very first instance. So you're above the event and before the event. And now, I want you to go ahead and turn and look toward now. Now, where's that fear and anxiety? Is it in front of you or it's gone now?
It's gone.
Just like that, it's gone.
Yeah.
Go ahead and float right down into that very first instance. See if you can find any of that old fear and anxiety. Is it there or is it totally gone now?
No, it's just situational.
Good. So go ahead and float up above and before. Float exactly where you were when it totally released. Turn and look towards now. And now go ahead and float all the way back to now, only as fast as you can let go of all of the fear and anxiety, all the way back to now. Kind of like a domino effect. You just float all the way back to now, easily and effortlessly.
Okay.
Now how do you feel?
I feel relieved.
That's great.
Yeah.
So what happened? You felt this fear and anxiety, you felt it strongly. I could see the shift in your face. And then you spend 3 minutes with Forrest and it's gone?
Well, I think near a lifetime of meditation.
Well,
I've
that's very
certainly
helpful.
thought about the event a lot, but I was never able to really untangle my emotional connection to it.
Yeah.
But I had a mature attitude towards it.
Right.
But there would be times where I would find myself 10 years old and facing, a big fear, or if in a moment of awe or something, I would have my mind would tether back to that.
Right.
So I don't know what it was that in timeline therapy, how that helped. It seems kind of like almost like a trick.
It does, but it's not a trick. It's just how it's a very, very powerful reframe.
Right.
And so when you're above and before the event, so as I'm walking through life, right?
Right.
And I fall into a hole of negative emotions.
Okay.
It makes sense because I fell into the hole, right? But if you're before falling into the hole, your unconscious mind says, well, I haven't fallen into the hole, so the negative emotion no longer makes sense.
Yeah, when I was above it, I was looking down at myself as a witness.
Right.
So being a witness changed my perspective of it.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
It's very, very, that's it. It's a very powerful reframe. And you did great. Fantastic.
Wow, well, thank you. I appreciate it.
So, pretty easy. I joke, when I get a client for timeline therapy, I tell them, I don't do refunds. If you lose all your problems in this session, I can't guarantee you get them back.
So how do you get maybe a client who has a particularly pernicious issue that is not easy for them to deal with?
Right.
How do you get them to connect with it in the past and rise above it?
So first you have to make sure that they're willing to let it go. If they're not, if they don't agree that it's okay to let it go, which is normal, because a lot of times there's a lot of secondary gain for having a problem.
Right.
Sometimes somebody hurt us, or we feel somebody hurt us, and we're holding on to that negative emotion because we want to prove to that person that they actually hurt us, and we want them to know. Mm-hmm. And until that is let go of, and we can say, you know what, forget it, I don't care. Until we can let go of that, we won't be ready to let it go. No healing can happen. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you might be in a lawsuit or something, and it's not okay for you to heal until you get out of that lawsuit.
Right.
Because you've got stuff to prove. And it's very natural, it's very normal, it happens all the time. So that's the first step. The second big part of the reframe, which you notice, is that position of above and before. It's kind of magical. Right. And when I explain this, when I teach it, how to do it, I explain that you're in a non-mirror image reverse. So that's math language, geometry language, non-mirror image reverse. And what it means is that you are perfectly mirroring how that negative emotion is held in the timeline, subconsciously.
Right.
And once you're in that position, it just wipes out the negative emotion.
Right.
It's a negative x, negative y equals positive x, positive y, and that equation wipes out mathematically.
Right.
And, so a spiritual way to say that would be when you get to the source of love, everything else is wiped out.
Right.
So it's the same kind of thing. It's just an extremely powerful reframe on how you're holding that one negative emotion. Timeline therapy works with one negative emotion. So when you said it, you said fear and anxiety. And if your subconscious mind had held each of those in a different place, this wouldn't have worked the same way. We would have had to do 2 sessions at the same time, you know.
Right.
So it all depends on how you hold it. But I grouped them together because that's how you presented it to me. And so I want to give it back to you the way you presented it. So I'm not going to change the words, because then we're going to change what we're working on in your brain.
If someone is, let's say someone is in a lawsuit, or they're in some form of mediation, whether it be just interpersonal or with court appointed.
Right.
What if they're not ready because of this lawsuit to let go of the bulk of what it is they're experiencing? Will you try to fractionalize it and find pieces that they can let go of?
I would work with them, for as much as they're willing to let go. So maybe the key issue they're not ready to let go of. Maybe there's something around it that we can let go of.
Right.
So I would look for another negative emotion that they're ready to let go of, and then I would do my best to talk them into letting it go. Tad James told me, when somebody's not ready, you can't force the issue, and it's very, very true. You just can't do that. If somebody's not ready, it's not going to work correctly, and it just becomes painfully obvious that it's not going to work. And so the beautiful thing about timeline therapy is, when they're ready to let go, and when you get above and before the very first event. So you held the event very close to when you thought it was, which was 10. But a lot of times the actual event is much farther back, and your unconscious mind, whether you believe in past lives or not, if your unconscious mind believes in them, it might store that information back there just because you believe it. Is it real or not? Well, it's real for your brain, so it doesn't matter. If you hold it back there, that's where we have to go to release the negative emotion. So you always have to get to that primal event. So if you do those 2 things, 1, get consent to let it go, and 2, get above and before the very, very first event, timeline therapy works every single time. Now, if it's a traumatic experience, I won't have them float down into the event. I'll keep them above and before it. So if it's like any kind of abuse or anything that's traumatic, then of course we won't float down in and relive it.
Right.
So if somebody is a practicing psychologist, timeline therapy is extremely valuable for their client, because they don't have to relive a traumatic event.
That's beautiful.